welcome to the Lisa Show Book Club. We're excited to have you here where we are with Carrie Ann. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
We are talking about the book Alone Together by Sherry Turkle, and this is part 2 where we're covering chapters 3 and 4. And if you're just joining us, go back and watch part 1 where we talk about the introduction and chapters 1 and 2 as well. But we're going to dive into, are robots really toys? Are they companions? What are they? We are talking about that today on the book club, along with a lot of other kinds of themes that go along. For those who are just joining us, Sherry Turkle has really done a really great job of laying out what the situation is, how it began. You know, computers were for hobbyists, enthusiasts. We have created robots as toys. We're kind of thinking about them in terms of caregivers. We're not sure, and this is a perfect moment as they become more and more sophisticated to be able to take a step back and say, okay, so then why are we doing all of this? Is our intention of what it means to be human and our connections, is it serving us or are we serving it?
Exactly.
So chapters 2 and 3, we were talking right before this about how it was kind of, this is kind of an interesting little sliver of this book.
Surprisingly fascinating because I like technology.
Yeah.
And as a designer and artist, I'm interested in technology for kind of many reasons, mostly in terms of letting technology take care of all the other things so I can be an artist, right?
Right, okay.
All the things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
But as I talk to other people, because I was compelled after reading these 2 chapters I kind of unofficially surveyed like people in my office, my own family members, like anyone who would talk to me about it. I asked them a few questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask them to you. Can I ask them to you?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Okay.
So first I asked, not thinking of your past life or your future life right now, and like don't think about cost. But if you had a robot in your life right now, what would you want it to do for you?
I think manual labor, to be honest. I would want it to be able to clean out my car, clean my house. Like I always wish there was like a dishwasher equivalent for like my floors. Different than the Roomba or the, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that kind of stuff. I really, really want like a self-driving car that could go pick up stuff for me and at Target without me.
Okay.
Or drive my kids around like a robot Uber or something like that. That's what I think of just initially. I'm sure that there's a more sophisticated response.
Well, no. This was by far and large like what people kind of said to me. They were like,
Am I typical?
Very typical. They said I want people to clean. Like that was the number one answer is like, I just want people to clean up. It's what people don't like to do, I guess, or whatever. Does it matter to you, though, if you're a robot? This is kind of the second step having to do with these chapters. Does it matter then if that robot is humanoid, empathetic, or like that's one side of the scale, or the other side of the scale where it's like just task-oriented and it's not based on like artificial intelligence and learning?
Okay, so this is a really good question, and I'm influenced by these chapters.
Okay.
I don't want it to be empathetic, and I don't want it to be a humanoid. I want it to be like a dishwasher, like as human as a dishwasher.
So
I don't want it to have a face.
Our fantasy of Rose, is it Rosie the robot from Jetsons? Like,
no,
you don't want a companion.
No, I have a dog for that.
Oh, well,
Gus.
in the chapters that talked about, is it Sony?
Yeah.
That has built the AIBO, the AIBO.
The robotic dog that people love because they're not worried about destroying it or killing it.
Or in the case of children, it dying.
Yes.
Or, that I had to go look it up. I went and looked it up, and I was kind of surprised.
It hasn't really caught on here.
Well, it's not as, like, cuddly and, like, compelling as I thought it would be. It's cute, like, it's sleek, but I kind of thought that maybe it would be furry. But then they talked about the, what did they call it? It's another companion animal that's looks like a baby harp seal.
Yes.
So it is cuddly and furry and squishy.
And they would give it to elderly people to just like take care of, much like you just give baby dolls to have
Right.
Alzheimer's patients.
Or a lap dog, something
Uh-huh,
that
yeah.
is tactile. The dog wasn't tactile, and that's kind of what surprised me. It was more for like interaction. And so the way that adults interacted with that dog versus children was interesting. The children were willing to suspend their belief
Yes.
and like kind of assign emotions and like really kind of developed like this empathic relationship with it, like taking care of it. Whereas some adults, depending on personality, she doesn't talk about personality,
No.
which I think really affects how people interact with
It
robots.
was more talking about how children really work hard for and she lays out in the book all these different case studies about how children work really hard for the approval. Like, do you think it
Yes.
likes me? The children
It
want
likes
it
me
to
better
love
than it
them.
likes my friends.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because then she talked about the elderly and how they kind of know it's not real, but they tend to prefer it
And they're
because it
willing
doesn't
to play
demand, and they're
along.
willing to play along.
Knowing it's not real.
Yeah, and I thought that was really fascinating.
Yes.
And especially because in this book, Alone Together, it talks about how we immediately set up technology either to be babysitters for little kids or to take care of the elderly. And Sherry kind of asks the questions like, why don't we want to do these things on our, as humans? Why do we want robots to take over caregiving roles? What does it mean to be human?
I asked people about that in my little surveys.
Oh, yeah?
I asked about babysitting or elder care. And granted, full disclosure,
Yeah.
my questions were not scientific and they were not done in private. And so
Okay.
people were able to we were kind of discussing this as a group sometimes. And so I think that if people had felt like a little more private and safer,
Yeah.
they might have admitted that there are some care jobs and tasks that could be that emotionally they could handle caring for their loved ones, where in kind of an open setting it was kind of like, oh well, no, I would rather care for my loved one. And we
Right.
didn't get into like, well, what if a robot was more like a nighttime monitor where it kept someone company, where it acted like a camera or a microphone so that a person could call out? What if it acted as an assistant getting an elderly person to and from a bathroom and back? That's where the majority of falls usually happen, or at night. So I think once people kind of maybe really thought through that, maybe they'd be a little bit more open to admitting there are some care tasks that
Oh, I
could help.
completely
What
agree.
what do you think about
Well,
that?
because
as a caretaker.
so much of this part of this book was set up of like, listen, in Japan, they're already super primed and open and excited for this because there are not enough young people to take care of their elderly population. And here in the United States, yeah, I've been a caregiver. I was a caregiver for my ill husband.
An intense caregiver,
And
not
an
just
intense caregiver. He couldn't do anything by himself. And I've researched caregiving around that, and largely it's an unpaid. It really falls on women, especially in middle age, while they are still raising kids and taking care of aging adults, and the
working.
burden is hard, and it's an unsustainable model.
Right.
Is basically. Everyone agrees across the board. It's unsustainable how we take care of our elderly population. But also caregiving too. Most parents are working, and so they're looking for babysitters and things, and so they're trying to think, okay, what could technology solve this problem? And Sherry says, but is caregiving a problem? Are we looking at it the wrong way?
Yes.
So there's two different questions here, and I love that, like, she says, we learn that to sustain realistic relationships, one must accept others and their complexity. When we imagine a robot as a true companion, there is no need to do any of this work. So when we're talking about a companion for a child or for someone who's elderly, are we just saying just take care of them? Or are we saying a companion? If they can give the appearance of aliveness and yet not disappoint, Relational artifacts such as sociable robots open new possibilities for narcissistic experiences. And I thought that is so true. So like you have people who are like, I don't want to take care of my kids. I don't want to take care of my aging adult, parents or whoever. It will really serve a narcissistic agenda. And I'm not saying that people who need help
are narcissists.
They are not. I'm saying quite the opposite. I'm saying this is a problem for everyone. Is this the best solution? And I just thought a lot of times we think, oh, this is the solution because it's risk-free. And Sherry in these 2 chapters is saying it's not risk-free. It's just a different set of problems. Let's not be unrealistic about it. So as far as like a caregiver, when I was taking care of my handicapped husband, I could barely lift him up and transfer him into his power chair, into his shower chair, and all these kinds of things with all the tubing and all that kind of stuff. I was young enough too. Now, in another decade, there's no way I would be able to do that. So transferring like a Hoyer lift is what a lot of people used to lift people who are essentially dead weight because they can't help at all. They couldn't even lift up their neck or whatever. And a Hoyer lift are really expensive. And it's a huge machinery.
It takes up a lot of space.
We couldn't afford one. Most people can't afford them. They're not covered by insurance all the time. Like we've got it anyway. I could go off on all this. But so people are saying, well, if you could find a lightweight, inexpensive way to like lift people and take care of caregiving components, that's different than being a companion.
Exactly.
And that's what she's talking about in Alone Together. We expect so much like it's going to solve all of our problems, but she's saying we need to take a step back and really evaluate what do we think it's going to take care of? What do we want it to take care of?
Right. And and we also need to keep in mind that this edition is 2017.
Yeah.
5 years old and how
5
much
years old, so much has changed.
AI has completely changed in 5 years. And I think of this type of model that she's talking about of caregiving is more like the Disney movie
WALL-E.
The medical caregiver, balloon guy.
Oh, white hero. Big Hero.
Big Hero 6. I love that movie. That he is empathetic, but he's not a learning AI, and so he has like kind of boundaries a little bit. Like he's this medical giving machine is not trying to be a companion, but the way that the young man in the book, he begins to treat him like a companion because he is missing relationships in his life, and that's kind of what happens.
And they talk about this in the book of like little kids are looking for their parents' attention, and so to say, oh go talk to your robot.
When they don't get it, they're getting it from a robot. But as a parent myself, I just need to expand my mind and like but I'm not ready to trust a robot to like take care of my kids. Think about how unpredictable a child can be and the various ways in which they can make messes, get into trouble, like screwdrivers, around the house and water, like just messes and things. And like conceivably right now, I can't think of a robot that could keep up with a small child. And so then you have all these ideas about ages, like then what becomes age appropriate for robot type care? You know what I mean?
Yes, and I wonder if Sherry Turkle, the author of this book, would say, you're not ready for that. The technology's not there, but it's coming.
It's coming.
And your kids will be much more open to the idea because they're more used to it than you are.
And I was surprised.
And your grandchildren?
The kids' responses were if a robot can do it better than a person, let a robot do it.
Yeah.
If a person can do it better than a robot, let a robot do it. So as technology is changing and robots do become better at a lot of things, like better than us at a lot of things, like their main criteria for a babysitter are they fun?
Yeah.
One kid said, does the robot think about ice cream?
Yeah.
Like, can they be spontaneous enough to like...
Are they going to be nice to me?
Break the rules?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yes. So, a child's criteria for this robot would be totally different than an adult. But something else I think we need to mention in this robot section, the AI that is out there, we as the average consumer are not seeing all that's available.
This is an important point.
a lot of the most advanced technology with like responsive robots, conversationally and physically, are being created for the adult industry. They are intimate companion robots, and so there's a lot out there that she alludes to without
Right.
without going into detail. It's talking more about relationships,
Yeah.
but there are robots out there that are already they're actual robots. That's not like an Alexa sitting on
Yeah.
your shelf. It's a humanoid robot that responds physically, that responds verbally to your actions. And right now, it's pure marketing that it went the intimate relationship route
Yeah.
when it was actually developed for companionship and like
Caregiving.
And so we'll see in the next few years what happens as
I know, I was
that
really
technology
struck with
crosses
that.
over. Oh, I was struck that it was 100. The guy they were talking about was like, oh, well, for marketing reasons, like 100%. It was just marketing.
But then it speaks to what we expect from relationships and what we're looking for
Yes.
and if we want that person to be and I say person, but I mean robot, completely
Yes.
see what I'm doing?
Dangerous already.
Not messy. Doesn't disagree with us.
Yes.
Gives us everything that we think that we know.
No
Is that a real
conflict,
relationship?
No friction.
But also is literally an inanimate object and does not have emotion. Can just mimic emotion so well that it can create it in you.
Right.
It's so interesting. It's like it reminds me of that movie Her, where
Yes.
it is this computer program, much like an Alexa, running like a romantic relationship over text messaging and email, but simultaneously doing that with thousands and thousands of others at the same way, because that's what it's programmed and designed to do.
Right.
But the human doesn't know any different,
the
because
protagonist finds
he feels so
out,
seen and heard.
he feels betrayed.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up like a Disney movie, right? Because the stories that we tell ourselves, and I would even say, especially like science fiction, does have a real world connection to the kind of technology that we create and the kind of technology that we aspire to.
Yes.
Right. And Sherry Turkle in the book also talks about Star Wars, AI, artificial intelligence, the movie WALL-E. All of these stories are giving us clues and hints as to what our human needs and desires are. People don't write these kinds of stories. They don't become so popular unless they touch kind of like our human nerve and like, this is where we think it's going. This is what I want, like an AI.
Or where we hope it's going.
I know.
This is a hope I think we have that, like she mentioned the movie 9, it's like a dystopian. But the robots were instilled with human values.
Yes.
And they're trying to protect those human values. And in WALL-E, the cartoon WALL-E, it's a robot that saves the earth and saves humanity. And so
but in an AI, it's grieving parents want to bring back their dead son.
That is one of the most disturbing movies.
It is, but if you can program a robot to like fulfill a relationship, if it is so realistic and so lifelike, if you are grieving and you want to download somebody's memories and personality, especially if they live their life online and it can become realistic, either as a robot or a hologram, how will that impact the grieving process? How will that, impact our physical world relations and relationships moving forward? I mean, it will have huge consequences the more realistic it becomes.
And ethical. As well. I mean, what if you wanted to, this is like, what if you wanted to recreate Marilyn Monroe and have her be,
Well, people will do that.
Your companion.
100% that will happen.
Right. And so we get into like ethics and law on this of what what privacy do you have as a being? Like what makes a person and a robot a robot?
And I don't know if it's in this, I don't think it's in this specific chapter, but it's coming up. But it talks about how a robot designer did this and created robots mimicking himself, his wife, and his children. And his kid was like freaked out. It was like, I don't want to see a robot that looks exactly like my dad. Like the kid did not like it.
Yes.
But it was saying, this is this is what we're going to do, like to live forever.
Uh-huh.
You never have to say goodbye. I mean, can you see that like being marketed?
Yes.
And it's these kind of ethical dilemmas. And I thought it was really interesting that it brings up then this question of harm. Just because we can do something, should we just do whatever we can do?
Right.
You know, is this a game for grown-ups or a more grown-up game? Is it a game at all? To treat these robots as toys is to miss the point. And even children know it. Is what, you know, she says at the end. And I love how this appearance of aliveness and yet not disappoint, it is a question of harm.
Right.
And Sherry says that dependence on a robot presents itself, again, as risk-free, a safe haven in an unsafe world, or cousins to a closed world, the lovable as safe and made to measure. But who's left out?
My goodness. All who's left out are the people who need relationships. Again, personality comes in.
Okay.
There were a couple of case studies where, for instance, a man who had been married 3 times, he recognized that he was a difficult person to live with and that he was selfish. And so it was really satisfying for him to have a robot relationship, you know, with the dog, whatever, where he doesn't disappoint, but he also mentioned, but having an alive companion would also be nice. And I thought, man, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't.
But we think we can. We think that technology
We think
is going
we
to
can.
solve our problem of loneliness and disconnection. We do.
But how then that person who is then able to indulge in a selfish, one-sided relationship is still functioning out in the rest of the world.
Yes.
And how and then how he is treating others. So the harm is not only like to ourselves, where we lose the ability to be empathetic, as she talks about. It also, she talked about physical harm, that some of the kids with the dogs would like knock it over and kind of be rough because they knew that the dog wasn't physically hurt. And so then you have to wonder, that type of behavior, how does then that begin to translate as that child matures? And the same problem comes with, and sorry to reference this again, but those intimate companion robots, that you can do anything to those humanoid robots and with no consequences, with no, I mean, you can commit crimes without consequences. And so how does that mentality affect our society? How does that affect that person, the relationships that person has with other real people? That's kind of what frightens me when it comes to the kind of companion thing is the behavior that is a little bit subversive. What can I get away with?
Yeah.
I mean, we have that
Instead
problem
of
now.
how can I connect
cutting Barbie's
with
hair
this?
and, you
Sure.
know, it happens. But yeah, instead of the purpose is connection, but instead it kind of feeds those more undesirable, darker parts of our character kind of thing.
Ooh,
But
yeah.
I have faith in humans. But I was disturbed by the journalist that talked to Sherry. And when she kind of gave her opinion
She was just saying, "Oh, I don't."
as a psychologist, that you know, she wasn't like super excited about AI companionship because in her mind it's healthier to have conflict in relationships and to be able to resolve those. And
at her professional level,
Yes.
as a professional opinion.
someone who actually talks and helps
Yes.
people. And this reporter called her a speciesist.
Yeah. Because she
And-
said, I don't think the goal is to marry and have children with a robot. And he was disgusted that
He
she
was
would say that.
disgusted. And he extrapolated that if that's how she felt about that, then she must not be a supporter of other kind of marginalized groups. And she was like,
how did you draw that
"Whoa,
conclusion?
That was
That's not
kind
what I'm
of-
saying.
No.
I thought that was so shocking.
It was
that
shocking.
we haven't, I don't think the average person, myself included, would have thought, oh, we're there yet to having those kinds of conversations. What I've loved about reading this book is, oh, yes, we are there. We need to be having these conversations. I appreciate you coming on this show and talking about these 2 particular chapters. Part of the reason why I wanted to do that, and I really have loved our our good, interesting conversation is I think we're having the wrong conversations with each other and with our kids. I think we're so narrowly focused on if our kids have cell phones and how much time they're on them. And those are important things. Yes, but I think that is the tip of the iceberg. And I think
Yes.
we need to be having deeper conversations with each other and society about what world we're creating for our kids and how we're using technology for them and presenting it and how we use it in ourselves. And these kinds of ethical questions and dilemmas of what it
already
means to
here.
connect with somebody and what does it mean to be lonely and what does it mean to have a real relationship, and is the simulation of emotion just better than nothing, or do we need to hold out as humans for real emotion?
Right.
I mean, these are the questions that we should be having with each
I'm
other.
an optimist, like eternal optimist, happy, gonna see the good.
Right.
But my alarmist warning here is that this is already going on, and
Yeah.
we're the ones that we're just catching up. We're catching up as adults. We're catching up to everything that's already going
Yes,
on.
we are.
Just this week, there was another headline about a tech creator who was all for AI becoming sentient and alive. And so, yeah, it's happening. So.
Yeah. Now is the time to be having these important
Let's talk about it.
conversations. A great place to start is reading the Lisa Show's book club, Alone Together with Sherry Turkle. This has been part 2. Again, go back and watch part 1. I really appreciate your time, Carrie Ann. Thank you so much.
This has been fun to talk about.
This has been really fun. So in part 2, we have been talking about chapters 3 and 4. Please join us next week as for Lisa Show's book club, where we will talk about part 3, covering chapters 5, 6, and 7. We're going to be talking about, well, then, if it's all going wrong, what can we hope from robots? How can we turn the conversation around? I hope you'll join us.